Welcome to the Occult London Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to exploring magic, mysticism, the kabala, as well as other topics. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please take a moment to leave us a review and a rating on iTunes or wherever you tune in. It really helps more folks find us and helps us to continue to get this message out there. Also, don't forget to check out occultlondon.co.uk to subscribe. And if you're feeling extra supportive, consider backing us on Patreon, or you can find us on Buy Me a Coffee. Every little bit goes a long way in keeping this show alive. And a heartfelt thanks for all your kindness and support. Now let's dive into today's episode. In today's episode, we are continuing our discussion on the Shem HaMephorash. Last episode, we discussed a little bit about what it was and some of its origins. But I also wanted to talk a bit about its history and development. As you would expect with a topic like this, there is a wide and a big history behind it, and it features in many different Hebrew texts such as the Zohar, the Bahir, as well as many magical grimoires, including the Sefer Ratziel, the Lesser Key of Solomon, and others. One of the first well-known written descriptions of the traditional use of the name of the 72 is given in a text called the Chayei Olam Haba, or Life of the Future World, by Abraham Abulafia from the 13th century. And this is a book that essentially was designed to teach readers how to achieve a prophetic experience. In the book, a technique is described whereby the aspirant makes use of head motions and controlled breathing while intoning the name. First, the mind is cleared and a preparatory meditation is performed. And I quote from the text: "Prepare to meet your God, O Israel. Prepare yourself, unify your heart and purify your body. Choose a special place for yourself where your voice will not be heard by anyone else. Meditate, alone, with no one else present. Sit in one place in a room or attic. Do not reveal your secret to anyone. Clear your mind completely. Then, with complete concentration and with a proper, pleasant, sweet melody, pronounce the name of the 72, using the natural vowels of each letter." So then it goes on to pronounce the actual names. It then goes on to say, "These 6 triplets of the holy name pronounce with 18 breaths. If the divine influx does not force you to stop, continue pronouncing the name in this manner until you reach the triplet MVM. Abulafia also describes how the pronunciation of the name should be accompanied by various head motions associated with the different vowels, as in the following example. When you pronounce the cholem together with the letters yod or kof, begin facing directly straight ahead. Do not incline your head to the right or left, upward or downward. Keep your head straight and even like the balance of a scale. Then, as you draw out the sound of the letter while you pronounce it, begin to move your head so as to face upwards towards the sky. Close your eyes, open your mouth, and let the words shine. As you exhale, continue to raise your head at the same rate so that you complete the exhalation and head motion simultaneously. Between each letter you may rest and prepare yourself. At this time, you can take as many as 3 breaths. Like those associated with the pronunciation, each triplet will therefore involve 12 breaths. After completing the entire name, or as much as possible, and receiving whatever God has offered, the aspirant thanks God and praises him." And that's a quote from Abraham Abulafia from the 13th century, talking about the more mystical aspects of the Shem HaMephorash. And as we can see, he's really getting into practical details of how it's meant to be used in action by the magician to cause a change in consciousness at will. And it sounds very modern in terms of how he's actually describing it, and it's very similar to, many of the sort of meditation practices that you find out there these days. Following on from Abelain, there's not a lot of written documentation about the practical use of the name by magicians, although there may well be in the Hebrew texts. Unfortunately, I don't have access to a lot of that stuff, but we do find it popping up again in the 13th century when Roger Bacon is documented complaining about a now long lost text called the Liber Shem HaMephorash, when he wrote the following: a certain Jewish book written by Solomon called the Liber Shem HaMephorash, full of wonders and exorcisms, which also mention the name of 72 letters. And also he wrote, and I translated this myself from Latin, so apologies if it's not 100% accurate to the original text. It was assumed there were many wonders that Solomon did, as he is said there in the power of that name. For that name, the virtue of Solomon, exorcisms, with which he sealed demons and cast off osses and tied them, as it is said there, and for which he performed many wonders, from which one is recited there, among many other things, that when building a temple he was not heard in the construction of a hammer nor axe, and is handled there a way in which this happened. So he's talking about the use of this sacred name is what King Solomon actually used to create his temple that was built without hands. Unfortunately, the book that Roger Bacon is talking about has not yet been discovered. However, according to my research, certain revisions of its texts have been preserved, among which the closest to the book apparently is an unpublished manuscript called the Rationales Libre HaMephorash. I wasn't able to find a copy of that, but I'm assuming it's going to be published at some point. Moving on from Roger Bacon, however, the Shem HaMephorash was significant to various magicians, occultists, scholars and mystics over the years. And these have included Johannes Reuchlin, Francesco Georgie, Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, who obviously mentions it in his 3 books of occult philosophy. Others involved a Blaise de Vigenère, Thomas Rudd, who sees it as a counter to the Ars Goetia demons. Athanasius Kircher with his Oedipus Egyptus, Lenain Lazare, who we mentioned in our last episode, Samuel Liddell, McGregor Mathers, and also Robert Ambelain with his reconstructed Elu Cohen. So what follows in this episode, we're going to kind of go through some of these figures in terms of talking about some of their ideas and contributions to understand how they've utilised this magical name in their work, and also its kind of development in magical practices. The first figure I wanted to focus on in our study is Johannes Reuchlin, who lived from 1455 to 1522. Reuchlin was a German Catholic humanist and a distinguished scholar of Greek and Hebrew, and his academic pursuits and scholarly work, often referred to by his Latinized name, Johannes, took him across to different parts of Europe, including Austria, Switzerland, Italy, and France. And his career and his kind of interests were primarily focused on enriching the German knowledge of Greek and Hebrew. And it was a real testament to his deep commitment to the study of languages and their ancient texts. Reuchlin really plays a pivotal role in understanding the 72 names of God as the names of angels brought into being by God's will. And he emphasised the individuality of these names by adding suffixes like El or Yah to make them pronounceable, viewing them really as being direct links back to the divine. In his 1517 work, De Arte Kabbalistica, Reuchlin lists the 72 angels of the Shem HaMephorash, presenting them not just as names, but also as really kind of manifestations of God's will. Through the letters of the Tetragrammaton and the insertion of divine names, he argued that these angelic names offer a pathway for humans to spiritually reconnect, to journey back towards the divine. So it really kind of highlights their importance in that broader context of spiritual and mystical practices. Reuchlin wrote, "We find the happy ranks of the 72 angels, by whom is said to stand Shem HaMephorash, that is, the great interpretive name of the high God. For 50 and 22 make 72. These are the angels strong over the whole earth. Through them, it is thought, did Moses, the miracle worker, divide the sea with his hand down to the seabed. For these are the angels of division, and God divided the earth in accordance with the number of angels." Reuchlin's ideas on the Shem are likely to have primarily stemmed from Abraham Abulafia's Spanish student, Joseph ibn Gigatilla, I might pronounce that wrong, from 1248 to 1325, whose work Jinat Egoz, the Garden of Nuts, which is a text that talks about the alphabetic manipulation, and Shah Are Ura, which is the paths of illumination on the Sephiroth. And these are both seen in Reuchlin's works, as is also elements of the Sefer Yetzirah, which is likely where Reuchlin gets his ideas on the importance of language in creation and of numbers in describing God's relation to the world. And Gershom Scholem also identifies Codex Halberstam 444 as the manuscript from which Reuchlin obtained much of his Kabbalistic sources. However, Reuchlin does have this huge impact on the development of magic and is a particularly strong influence on other scholars like Agrippa and Kircher, who we will be discussing later on. The next important figure we encounter is the Italian friar Francesco Georgie, who is also known as the Kabbalist Friar of Venice by the Warburg Institute's late occult specialist Francis Yates. Georgie was born in 1466, passing away in 1540, was a Franciscan friar who's really had his writings really contributed really significantly to the Renaissance's spiritual and mystical discussions. His most notable work is De Harmonia Mundi Totius, published in 1525. And this really lays out a vision of the universe as created according to the universal system of proportions, akin to almost like the mathematical laws that architects use. And this perspective not only highlights this kind of Renaissance viewpoint of mathematical harmony of numbers and beauty behind the universe, but is also reflected in a kind of deep engagement with the Platonic and the Pythagorean traditions. Georgie was proficient in Hebrew and very well versed in the ideas of the Kabbalah, and really dedicated his intellectual life to studying ideas on spiritual elevation that span across the Platonic, the Aristotelian, the Neoplatonic, Hermetic, Jewish and Christian thought. And this really continued a lot of the work that had been initiated by earlier Renaissance figures like Ficino and obviously Pico della Mirandola. Georgie believed that the Kabbalah could validate the truths of Christianity as presented in the Bible, and he linked the numbers derived from the Hebrew alphabet with the Pythagorean concept of the harmony of the spheres. He actually, one of the interesting things about Georgie as well is he actually travelled to the UK with another scholar called Marco Raphael in 1531, and actually spent a great deal of time in England, contributing significantly to the initiation of a school of Platonic mysticism in England that was later called Rosicrucianism, and influenced figures like John Dee, Robert Flood, Philip Sidney, Edmund Spencer, and also Francis Bacon. So he's quite interesting from that point of view. As mentioned, a key part in the ideas of Georgie was that the Kabbalah could validate the truths of Christianity hidden within the Bible. but that also the universe was composed of celestial hierarchies that could be utilised by the magician or the mystic to lead to a greater understanding of himself. And this is described by Francis Yates as follows. Georgie grafts the Kabbalist influence onto the traditions of his order. He develops that correlation between Hebrew and Christian angelic systems, already present in Pico to a high degree of intensity. For Georgie, with his Franciscan optimism, the angels are close indeed, and Kabbalah has brought them closer. He accepts the connections between angelic hierarchies and planetary spheres, and rises up happily through the stars to the angels, hearing all the way those harmonies on each level of creation, imparted by the Creator to his universe, founded on number and numerical laws of proportion. The secret of Georgie's universe was number, for it was built, so he believed, by its architect, as a perfectly proportioned temple in accordance with unalterable laws of cosmic geometry. So as we can see from that particular quote, his ideas are very, very closely related, obviously, to the ideas from the kind of Masonic angle as well, of the universe being created with cosmic geometry by God, the grand geometrician of the universe. Georgie's work also suggests that the truths about the cosmos and its reality can be found within the interlinking of Judeo and Christian scripture, and advocates for an experiential approach to Christianity that allows believers to really kind of grasp the essence of this firsthand through the sacred names of, the Shem HaMephorash, etc. He was also a really accomplished poet whose mystical prose I really like, and I think it kind of captures some of the Hermetic aspects that he was interested in. For example, he wrote, "And if we want to climb still higher, knowing it is up to the supermundane plane, we will find that while there are supercelestial waters that continually praise the eternal, the waters, I say, and the fire divine, as we've touched above, likewise they are in the archetype fields, from which spring all things, joyous, polished, sweet, pleasant, and delectable things. And among the oldest theologians, this region is called the supermundane noon, of which one sings in the canticles. Teach me where you are, where at noon you sleep in peace. Come, O south wind, my light noonday wind, and your breath sings in my orchard, then will flow its embalmed liquors, and the sweet and fragrant odours." And that's a quote from Francesco Georgie from 1578. The next important figure we will look at in relation to the Shem HaMephorash is the magician and scholar Cornelius Agrippa, whose first book of occult philosophy was published in Paris and Antwerp in 1531, and all three books being published in Cologne in 1533. Agrippa is probably the most influential in terms of the development of the Shem, just purely because his books of occult philosophy are kind of the most widely distributed, and the majority of people have read them. Agrippa was heavily influenced by Francesco Georgie in his work. As Francis Yates writes, "Like Georgie, Agrippa rises through the three worlds: the elemental world, the celestial world, the super-celestial world. Like Georgie, Agrippa concentrates on number, on proportion, in man and the universe, using the Vitruvian figures. Like Georgie, Agrippa rises to the super-celestial world where he is in contact with the angels, where the Trinity is proved, whence influences from the angels pour down through the planets, where the Hebrew names of God are listed, though the name of Jesus is now the most powerful of all names. All planetary influences are good, since the influence of the celestial hierarchies descends through them. The operator who is operating a completely white magic, free from demons, is a pious and good Christian Kabbalist. The outlook of the De Occult Philosophia is almost identically the same in its main outlines as the outlook of the De Harmonia Mundi. Agrippa follows the same processes as Reuchlin and also Georgie in that he explains the concept of taking the 72 trigrams that we have and how he makes the names in these texts. He also describes how the names of the 72 mighty angels are formed by adding the suffix yod he or the suffix aleph lamed el to the end of the name. Yah signifies mercy and beneficence, whereas El embodies severity and judgment. So each deity name contains 3 letters, while each angelic name formed from them has 5 letters. This may seem strange to many modern occultists who normally associate the god name El with Chesed, divine mercy. However, these early magicians saw El as being divine severity and Yah as divine mercy, Yah being associated with the benevolence of the Divine Father and Chokhmah. Agrippa describes the process as follows. There is a certain text in Exodus contained in 3 verses, whereof every one is writ, with 72 letters, beginning thus. The first, Vajisa, the second, Vajabo, the third, Vajot, which are extended into one line, the first and third, from the left hand to the right, but the middle in a contrary order, beginning from the right to the left, is terminated on the left hand, then each of the 3 letters being subordinate, the one to the other, make one name, which are 72 names, which the Hebrews call Shem HaMephorash, to which, if the divine name El or Yah be added, they produce 72 trisyllable names of angels, whereof every one carries the great name of God, as it is written, My angel shall go before thee, observing, for my name is in him. And these are those that are set over the 72 celestial quinaries, and so many, and cooperate with the 72 seniors of the synagogue, and so many disciples of Christ, and their names according to the extraction which the Kabbalists make are manifest in this following table according to one manner which we have spoken of. That's a quote from Agrippa. One thing that's important to note is that Agrippa does not include the ruling angels that Ambelain includes later on, and also doesn't include the demons of Rud, who would later evoke and use the 72 angels of the Shem HaMephorash to bind and control the goetic demons using dual seals, with the necessary angel seal and psalm. So the 72 names of the Shem are seen as being 72 expressions of the Tetragrammaton and also permutations of the divine name, and they're also accorded elemental correspondences in Agrippa. So the first 18 names are attributed to fire, Yod, the second 18 to water, He, the third to vow, and the fourth to earth, to mirror the 4 worlds of the Tree of Life. Agrippa also places the Shem HaMephorash at the heart of a cosmic vision that features multiple symmetries. So he associates the 72 segments of the sun, corresponding to the 6 segments for each of the 12 zodiac signs, with an astral structure that mirrors various human and spiritual aspects. And these 72 parts reflect in 3 main areas. So there's 72 types of people or languages that make up humanity, the 72 parts of the human body, and the 72 joints that connect these parts. Also, each of these 72 segments is governed by an angel, symbolising the spiritual leaders ranging from the elders of the synagogue to the disciples of Christ. And this kind of again underlines this sort of cosmic symmetry that's very close to what Francesco Georgie was also talking about. Another grimoire that features the Shem angels is the Liber Juratus. However, this is not in the same complex way as Agrippa, and instead it gives you the names as a block, which you would kind of invoke one after another in one long invocation. It also interestingly tells the magician to use the name Shem HaMephorash as a magical and power world in itself, which is interesting, as in the below prayer. The idea probably being that the word would then call upon all the 72 angels at once, almost like a time-saving device, I think. And I quote, "O invisible God, O inestimable God, O ineffable God, O incommunicable God, O incorruptible God, O merciful God, O most sweet God, O high and glorious God, O God of infinite mercy. I, although an unworthy sinner, full of iniquity, deceit and malice, most humbly come to your mercy, praying and beseeching you, not to have respect to all and innumerable mine iniquities, but even as you are wont to have mercy upon sinners and to hear the prayers of the humble and meek. Even so I beseech you to vouchsafe to hear me, your servant, although unworthy, yet calling unto you for the blessing and consecrating of this blood, your creature, that it may be made apt and worthy for the ink of the most precious and holy seal, and of your name Shem HaMephorash, so that it may have the grapness and the meekness which ought to have your most holy name, which is written with 4 letters, Yod, He, Vau, Daleth, Agla, Eloi, Yain, Theos, Dios, which being heard all celestial, terrestrial, and infernal creatures do tremble, fear, and worship it. And by these your most holy names, On, Alpha and Omega, Principian, El, Eli, Elo, Eloi, Elion, Sotha, Emmanuel, Sabaoth, Adonai, Ege, Yah, Ye, may this creature of blood be blessed, prepared and made apt for the ink of your holy soul, and of your most holy name, Shem HaMephorash, which is blessed, world without end. Amen." That's a prayer from Liber Geratus that mentions the Shem HaMephorash. So as you can see already from this kind of survey, there's lots of different examples about how they use the Shem HaMephorash already. Some are quite complex and some, more meditative, like the ones from Abba, Abulafia, etc. The next development in the next kind of person in the development of the Shem is the arrival of the French magician Blaise de Vigenère and the Arsenal 2495 manuscript in around 1523. Blaise is a French diplomat, alchemist and magician, and also translator of the Livy text, and is best known for inventing the method of encryption known as the auto key cipher. Blaise had become interested in magic, the occult and the kabala later on in his life, and was also heavily influenced by the work of Johannes Reuchlin when he wrote the Arsenal manuscript with the table of the 72 angels of the Shem HaMephorash with their names, seals, powers, and also related psalms and the days in which they preserved. The work of Blaise was also later used by Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers for the Golden Dawn Adeptus Minor paper, as well as Robert Ambelain in his La Kabala Practicale. We don't know if the Shem HaMephorash seals were invented by Blaise de Vigenère or by someone else, but what we can be certain about is that he was one of the first ones to use the seals in order to evoke the Shem HaMephorash angels. De Vigenère's material was later copied and expanded by the English magician Thomas Rudd, 1583 to 1656, who also proposed in his Harley manuscript 64381, which is now published as the Goetia of Dr. Rudd. Dr. Rudd basically talks about it being a key component to the magical practices in the Lesser Key of Solomon as a balancing force against the evil spirits of the Ars Goetia. So in Harley manuscript 6483, or the Goetia of Dr. Rudd, Rudd basically adopts the seals of Vigenère for working with the 72 goetic demons, also using the 72 corresponding Shem HaMephorash angels and their associated biblical verses from the Psalms. And the Shem HaMephorash angels are used to control the goetic demons, transforming the nature of the goetic magic into a much safer and easier form of practice. And the method of doing this was primarily through the magician wearing the seal or pentacle as a layman on the chest, during the actual magical operation. And this is described by Skinner and David Rankin as follows. By wearing the seal with the reverse side bearing the appropriate controlling Shem HaMephorash angel facing towards his heart, the magician is more protected from the wiles or malice of the demon he has summoned. So this is quite interesting, as it also fits with the Jewish traditions of the high priest wearing a breastplate whilst in the sanctuary, embedded with jewels to protect himself from the energies involved in working with the god in this sanctuary. Also, Rankin and Skinner write in their Goetia of Dr. Rudd the following. The key to control of the demons listed in the Goetia is summed up in just one word, Shem HaMephorash. This word was written at the front of some of the manuscripts of the Goetia and was duly transcribed on Mather's Crowley at the front of their edition without any explanation. Its presence has not been fully explained hereto in any printed copy of this grimoire, but it is the single most important key to using this grimoire. To draw a simple parallel is like printing penicillin at the front of a list of bacteria. For the Shem HaMephorash to transliterate it in a more rational fashion is the key to controlling the 72 demons and ensuring their compliance with the commands of the magician. The Shem HaMephorash is literally the name of God, embedded in 3 verses in Exodus. From it, Kabbalists generated the 72 names of the angels, which have been a highly significant list of angels for a long time. There is precisely one angel for one demon, and that angel is the antidote that enables you to control that demon. There is a one-to-one correspondence angel to demon, a specific demon being controlled by a specific angel. These can be seen in each double seal. And that's a quote from Stephen Skinner and David Rankin discussing the Shem HaMephorash. The next important figure in relation to the development of the Shem is Athanasius Kircher, who along with Agrippa can be seen as one of the key sources for the precursor of the occult revival. Kircher, born 1602 to 1680, was a German Jesuit scholar and polymath who published around 40 major works, most notably in the fields of comparative religion, geology and medicine. And he's been compared to fellow Jesuit Roger Joseph Boscovich and also Leonardo da Vinci for his huge amount of interests, and was also honoured with the title of Master of 100 Arts. Kircher had a very keen interest in the Kabbalah and the Jewish mystical traditions in general, building on the work of earlier Christian scholars like Pico della Mirandola. And Kircher saw the Kabbalah as being a key to unlocking ancient wisdom. His 1652 book, Oedipus Egypticus, included a famous illustration of the Kabbalistic tree of life, which he believed held hidden meanings connected to Egyptian hieroglyphics and universal knowledge. And while Kircher's work contained misinterpretations of Kabbalah, it sparked a huge amount of interest across Europe in these mystical concepts. And this influence extended well beyond his time, with his Tree of Life illustration being used by many of the occultists of the 20th century, including the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in the 19th century, who incorporated quite a few of Kircher's diagrams of the Tree of Life, and also some of the things he wrote about into their knowledge lectures and the grade structure, with some slight modifications with regards to the positions of the paths and the correspondences. A distinctive aspect of Kircher's Tree of Life is its planetary associations with the Sephiroth principles. So he uniquely assigns the Sephiroth from bottom to top with planetary symbols in a way that diverges from traditional astronomical orders. So, for example, he links Malkut to the moon, Yesod to Mercury, and then so on up to Kesed with Jupiter, intentionally excluding the highest 3 Sephiroth from planetary associations. and rearranging the traditional positions of Jupiter and Saturn as well as the Sun. The Golden Dawn's version obviously differs quite differently, assigning Earth to Malkut and maintaining the Earth's connection to Yesod. And their configuration also aligns the planets in the Babylonian order, which is the Moon, Yesod, Mercury, Hod, Venus, Netzach, Sun, Tiferet, Mars, Geburah, Jupiter, Kesed, and then Bina, Saturn. So introducing the planetary link to the top three as well. The most famous work by Athanasius Kircher is his Oedipus Egypticus, which was his kind of main work on Egyptology. And the 3 full folio tome, it has loads of like really fascinating illustrations and diagrams. And it was published in Rome in 1652 to 54. This is an interesting book that has a lot of information about Egypt and the Kabbalah, but also includes the most famous image of the Shem HaMephorash angels, where they're placed in a circle. And you can probably see this as the image for this particular podcast episode. This famous image is described in the text as follows. This rare cut shows the names of God in 72 languages inscribed upon the petals of a symbolic sunflower. Above the circle are the 72 powers of God, according to the Hebrew Kabbalah. Below are 2 trees, that on the left bearing the symbols of the planets, and that on the right the signs of the zodiac, and the names of the tribes of Israel. The esoteric doctrines of the Kabbalah are in alignment with the secret teachings of all the schools of philosophy, but the method by which its secrets are revealed to the wise and concealed from the ignorant is most unusual. The picture Kircher based his diagram on, however, is actually from an earlier work by the French Jewish turned Christian Kabbalist Philip de Aquin, called The Interpretation of the Tree of Kabbalah. But Kircher did change it to suit his own interests. So whilst Aquin's figure is dominated by a diagram of the 10 Sephirot, the Kabbalistic tree surrounded in the corners by 4 trees symbolising various Kabbalistic doctrines, Kircher's diagram removes the Sephirotic tree, which he treats separately in a different section of the treatise, and replaces it with a mandala-like sunflower bearing the names of God. And the different divine names radiating out in a circular pattern from the tetragrammaton in the centre, then culminating in the 72 names of God arrayed along the circumference. Other interesting things about this particular image are in the middle, you have a circle with the secret initials of IHS. It is often interpreted as meaning Jesus Hominum Salvator, or Jesus Saviour of Men, or with the term in hoc signo, which is Latin for in this sign we shall conquer. On the bottom right of the image, he also has an image of a tree that features the names of the 12 tribes of Israel, which includes the 12 banners and the zodiacal signs. The bottom left, we have the 7 archangels ruling over the planets, and the image also links the 72 names of the Psalms, with the exception of the 70th name, which is attributed to a verse from Genesis. Kircher also gives astrological decan correspondences. The first name is Cardinal Fire, Aries, and then we have the decans, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th is fixed fire, Leo, then into mutable fire, then hay, water, cardinal, fixed, mutable, and then vow, air, etc. So it goes on like that. So that's a little bit about Kircher, and obviously this kind of really had a huge influence across Europe and really impacted other scholars of Kabbalah. So, for example, like Nor von Rosenroth, etc. Another text that helped spread the popularity of the Shem, however, was the 6th and 7th books of Moses, and in particular the section inside this grimoire titled Shem HaMephorash and Shem HaMephorash. And these are pseudo-epigraphical texts that are meant to have been written by Moses, but were actually written in the 17th century in Germany by Andreas Lupius, who was a bookseller and publisher. And the text has several interesting illustrations of the Shem HaMephorash, which are the same as those outlined in Agrippa's book of philosophy. It also uses the Psalms and also ascribes the sacred names of the Shem as follows. The 72 divine names in the Hebrew language always denote the name of God, whether they are read from the beginning to the end or from the right or the left, and they are of immense power. This book also has other interesting elements, such as divine magical names. It calls Shem HaMephorash, which are combinations of different divine names and words grouped in sets of 7, and they're given different properties according to the miracles of Adam and Moses. So Adam is meant to have been able to speak to all things spiritual and material, so his 7 Shem HaMephorash are concerned with really kind of conferring the spiritual ability to communicate with different facets of existence. And these Shem HaMephorash, or collections of divine barbarous words, are actually taken from another grimoire, which is titled Liber Solomonis, or Sefer Ratziel, the Book of Solomon and the Book of Ratziel, which was also based on an older Jewish magical text titled the Sefer Ratziel HaMalak, or the Book of the Angel of Ratziel. And this holds an account of spells given to Adam from the angel Ratziel. And the book is quite interesting also in the fact that it shows the importance of calling a higher power to control a lower power. And I quote, "Whoever lays hold in strong faith and trust in the first Creator must first implore the divine help and blessing, not only with the lips but also with the holy gestures and humble heart, praying fervently and continually that he may enlighten the mind and take away from the soul all darkness of the body. For precisely as when our souls are moved by some ordinary cause, so the soul moves all the members of the body to contribute something towards the accomplishment of a contemplated work. Therefore the great Creator, when he is worshipped in spirit and in truth, and when no unnecessary things are asked of him, when the prayer is devoutly preferred, will cause the lower order of creatures to yield obedience to the wishes of man, according to their state, order, and calling. For man was made in the image and likeness of God, and endowed with reason and working under the favour of God. He will obtain his desire through faith and wisdom, first from the stars and from the heavens, by the rational reflections of his spirit, second by the animal kingdom through his senses, third by the elements through his fourfold body. Therefore man binds all creatures through comparison, by calling upon the higher power, through the name and power which governs one thing, and thereafter through the lower things themselves." That's a quote from the Sefer Ratziel. Another important figure that is relevant to our discussion on the Shem HaMephorash angels is the French occultist and magician Lenain 1793 to 1877, who wrote an important text called La Science Kabbalistique in Amiens in 1823. This important magical text focuses heavily on the magic of the Shem, or good geniuses who surround the throne of God, and also gives ways to identify them. This important text was picked up by Pappus when he was the Grand Master of the Order Kabbalistique de la Reuchlin, and republished in 1909. And even in that book that Pappus published, he actually wrote, "No publication could benefit the progress of Kabbalistic studies more than the reissue of Lenain's very rare tract." Since that time, it's inspired many different esoteric organisations and magicians, such as Mathers of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Robert Ambelain of the Ordo Martiniste, as well as others. And if we look at Lenain's purpose in writing the book, he wrote, "It was to make the public aware of what magic is, so that each may obtain a correct notion of it, for ignorance demonises everything it doesn't understand." Lenain begins in the text by discussing the power of numbers, and also gives really interesting analysis of the name of God, incorporating similar phrasing to that used by Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin. God created all things by weight, number and measure. And many of the chapters are kind of heavily influenced by some of the work of Saint-Martin. So he explains each of the 22 Hebrew letters in detail, and also gives a really good introduction to their use in how they're formed of the Shem HaMephorash, or 72 lettered name of God, which, as in some of the other texts we've discussed, is formed of 3 letters with the suffix added to it, creating 72 angels or geniuses, which are also associated with the circle of eternity, each ruling over 5 degrees of the circle. Lenain also provides a simple method to identify the 3 geniuses which rule over the various aspects of one's life, which is also something you see in Agrippa. And he also gives a detailed description of the sacred calendar. The 3 geniuses which impact an individual's life, according to Lenain, are the elemental, the astrological and the divine. And this knowledge can then be used in different ways, from designing talismans to protection and good fortune, but also knowing the best times to undertake travel, to do a business deal, or to avoid misfortune. Lenain describes the process as follows in a section of his book called "To Know One's Genius, or That of a Person Who Made the Request." And I quote, "According to the doctrine of Agrippa, all men have 3 guardian angels or geniuses. The first is sacred. He doesn't emanate from the power of the stars, but he comes from God as soon as the soul is created. That spirit is universal and above nature. He is the director of life. He communicates the divine light, that is, the light of the word, which lighteth all men that cometh into the world. And he exalts the soul towards the Creator. He is known by means of the table of hours. The second genius emanates from the astrological world, that is, from the power of the stars. Bring man to virtue. He influences the moral side and speech. He is known by means of the table of days. The third genius emanates from the elemental world, and he rules over man's physical body. He influences health, movement and actions, and he is known by the means of the table of quinaries." He then goes on to give an example of how one would use this. Suppose a person wishes to know their geniuses. She says she was born on November 17th at 10:15 in the morning. First, I look in the table of quinaries and see that the 49th genius rules from November 15th to 19th inclusive, which influences the person's physical body. Then I look in the table of days, see the third table, and I see that the 27th genius corresponds to November 17th, which governs the morality of the person. In the last place, I look at the table of hours, see the fourth table, and see that the 31st genius rules from 10 a.m. to 10:20 a.m. inclusive, which influences the mind and soul of the person. So as you can see, he's kind of really building up this different levels of correspondences and using the different angels depending on your kind of goal, which actually is quite similar in many ways to some of the Kabbalistic approach, where we have the Atzaluthic or the archetypal world. We've got the Briatic, which is the creative, then Yetzirah, the formative, and then Asaya, which is the world of action. And each one is obviously attributed to a different correspondence. So Atzaluth is the god name, Bria is the archangel, Yetzirah is the order of angels, and then Asaya would be more the either mundane chakra or the kind of elemental kingdom from that point of view. So you could technically almost use the same process with regards to Lenain. And also Lenain gives an extensive list of the attributes, characteristics, powers and associations of the 72 angels. And they kind of really provide a building block for all of the operations and talismans which kind of go on from there. And many of these are quite heavily influenced by Agrippa's occult philosophy, Kircher, Egyptus, Oedipus. He does also mention that he's going to bring out another book which has the seals necessary to create the talismans based on the 72 geniuses, but unfortunately this was never it's never materialized, so as far as we know. We now move on to the Golden Dawn and their work within the Shem HaMephorash. As mentioned, the Golden Dawn's founder Matthias McGregor and William Westcott were both high-ranking Freemasons, but were also steeped in much of the history and methods from the grimoire tradition. And so when it came to the Shem, they basically took everything that had been developed previously and unify it into a new system that was given to members of the order once they'd reached the grade of Philosophus, which corresponds to the Sephir of Netzach on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. The Golden Dawn system uses the same principles as Agrippa to attribute the 72 angelic names to the 72 decants of the zodiac. However, they made the first Shem, Yahuwah, begin with 0 degrees Leo under the rulership of Star Regulus, which is also called Cor Leonis, or the Heart of the Lion, and Star of the Prince. And this is one of the very bright stars that the Persians called the royal stars and guardians of the heavens. This shift is significant, moving it into the Heart of the Lion, because it aligns much closer with sidereal astrology and also the procession of the equinoxes. But it also puts Christ as the heart, the starting point of everything from the point of view of the angels. The Golden Dawn also added additional correspondences to the Shem HaMephorash in the form of quinances of day and night. Essentially, the wheel of the zodiac was divided into 3 decants, or divisions, which were attributed to the planets, and also within these would be quinances attributed to a day and a night angel. So, for example, in Leo, the first 5 days of Leo would be the first angel, 6 to 10 would be the second angel, 11 to 15 the third angel, and so on and so forth. They also add the planets to the system. So Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sol, Venus, Mercury, Luna, but also really usefully the minor arcana of the tarot and angelic choirs as well. And this process is described by the Ciceros in their excellent book Tarot Talismans as follows. Each one of these 72 angels also rules over one of the 72 quinances, 5 degrees of the zodiac. Therefore, 2 angels rule over each of the 36 decadents, as well as the 36 pip minor arcana cards that correspond to these decanates. Every zodiacal sign has 6 of these decanate angels assigned to it. These angels are also separated into different choirs of angels and further classified into 4 groupings under the 4 elemental divisions of the Tetragrammaton. The Golden Dawn system is really effective as it gives you a lot more to work with and enables you to work in the 4 worlds, building on the original 3 letters and really creating a whole magical system around it. So, for example, in the Golden Dawn system, the correspondences for the first angel, which is Yahuwah, would be, so the name would be Yahuwah, sign would be Leo, planet Saturn, degree 0 to 5, meaning God the Exalter. Psalm, and thou, O Tetragrammaton, art a shield about me, my glory, and he who lifted up my head. Tarot is the 5 of Wands. So as you can see, you could use all of those different correspondences and actually work with that in a practical ritual way, or a way of prayer to actually work with the angel using those symbols. The final person that's worth mentioning in our historical survey is Robert Ambelain. Robert Ambelain, born 1907 to 1997, was a French author known for his involvement in the esoteric Masonic Martinist movement, and he's really claimed credit for the revival of the primitive Scottish Rite, and also authored various different works, including The Masonic Secret, which delves into significant aspects of Masonry. In 1943, under the alias of Orifa, Ambelain resurrected the order of the Elu Cohen, and the degrees of this reconstituted order mirrored the original Elu Cohen operative degrees, pieced together from different materials available to him at that time. Later, the order's name was altered to the Order Martinista Elu Cohen, which also incorporated various different initiatory degrees into it as well. And this really kind of serves as the outer order preceding entry into the operative degrees. Ambelain published a really interesting book, though, that's definitely worth reading if you can get a copy of it, called Practical Kabbalah, or La Kabbalah Pratique, which offers a really kind of unique method of invoking and collaborating with the 72 angels of the Shem. Ambelain's work repackages much of what Lenain did, particularly with the seals of Arsenal 425. But he also added much more elements from the kind of ceremonial, magical way of working with them, using specific days of ruling and actually having specific ritual instructions on actually working with them. Ambelain would start all of his proceedings with Eliphas Levi's grand invocation of Solomon that comes from Ritual de la Haute Magie, which is basically an invocation of the tree of life in the spheres of sensation of the magician, so within the aura. This is a beautiful invocation, so I wanted to read it aloud for you all. The Kabbalistic Invocation of Solomon. Powers of the kingdom be beneath my left foot and within my right hand. Glory and eternity touch my shoulders and guide me in the paths of victory. Mercy and justice, be ye the equilibrium and splendour of my life. Understanding and wisdom, give unto me the crown. Spirits of Malkut, conduct me between the two columns, whereon is supported the whole edifice of the temple. Angels of Netzach and of Hod, strengthen me upon the cubical stone of Yesod. O Gedulaliel, O Geburahel, O Tiferet, Binahel, be thou my love. Ruach, Chochmahel, be thou my light. Be that which thou art and that which thou willest to be, O Keteriel. Ishim, assist me in the name of Shaddai. Cherubim, be my strength in the name of Adonai. Beni Elohim, be ye my brethren in the name of the Son and by the virtues of Zabayot. Elohim, fight for me in the name of the Tetragrammaton. Malachim, protect me in the name of Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. Seraphim, purify my love in the name of Eloah. Chasmalim, enlighten me with the splendours of Eloi and of Shekinah. Aralim, act ye. Ophanim, revolve and shine. Kayosh HaKwadesh, cry aloud, speak, roar and groan. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Shaddai Adonai Yod-Yahweh, Eheya Asher Eheya. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Amen. And that is the Kabbalistic Invocation of Solomon from Eliphas Levi. Ambelain would then use the opening of the Shem prayer, which is taken from Lenain's Le Science Kabbalistique, and then would asperge with salt whilst reciting Psalm 99, the space and the altar, and also consecrating using Psalm 103. And this process is described by Ambelain as follows. One should trace them, the specific name of the 72 angels, in red on virgin parchment, surrounded by a double circle in black, within which which one traces the corresponding verse from the Psalms, either in Latin or preferably in Hebrew in red. One may copy it faithfully from a Hebrew Bible. The name of the angel should be traced above the seal in Malachim characters. In order to consecrate them, one should utilise the following ritual. The altar is decorated in the usual manner, red cloth with luminaries lit, and then one places the parchment pentacle on the lead hexagram of the altar stone. It is copiously censed while the grand invocation of Solomon is recited, followed by, "Thus said Adonai, the heaven is my throne and the earth my footstool. Where is the house that ye built unto me? And where is the place of my rest? For all those things hath mine hand made. Thus said Adonai, I was glad also when they said unto me, Let us go into the house of the beard. Our feet shall stand within thy gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem is builded as a city that is compact together. Peace be within thy walls and prosperity within thy palaces. For except Adonai build the house, they labour in vain that built it. Except Adonai's keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. Father of power and greatness, being of beings, almighty sanctifier who created all things from nothing, despise not thy servant, but let it please thee to purify, consecrate and sanctify this place dedicated to thy service. Command thy angel to descend, reside, remain for thy glory and service. Amen. So the magician would then asperge the pentacle with lustral water and then with salt, whilst reciting Psalm 98 and 102 from the Vulgate. The Lord reigneth, let the people tremble, and bless the Lord, O my soul. Then he would lay it under a lit lamp in the middle of the lead hexagram and meditate silently on it before going on to the main conjuration of the entity. And that's kind of a description of the Ambelain method. Since Ambelain, there's been lots of different developments, lots of books written about the Shem angels, so they continue to be popular with magicians and occultists since that time. So that kind of concludes our survey of the development of the Shem HaMephorash and how they developed over the ages. But what about practical applications? Well, like magically working with any deity, angel or archangelic force, there are really a multitude of different ways that you can work with them, ranging from more contemplative, meditative approaches through to high magic and ritual. From a practical point of view, the Shem has been, put into extensive use over the centuries, as we can see in many different Jewish writings and also other texts. It was reportedly said to have been used in the construction of the golem, and if you listen to our episodes on that, you can find out more about that. But the name was actually the force that brought life to the golem was the Shem, and the Sefer Ratziel also states that no magic is successfully worked without the support of the name. Abraham Abulafia, who we mentioned previously, himself apparently voiced his disapproval and dismay at the magical use of the name of the 72 names. And he actually describes a specific magical practice in one of his texts when he writes the following, and I quote, "I've found in one of the books, whose title I would like not to mention, whoever wants to bring a woman to him so that she will love him, let him pronounce the name of," and then he inserts an angelic name there, "frontward and backward 7 times in the night of Wednesday, during the first hour of night, which is the time of Saturn. And let him conjure Kaftziel, that is the angel presiding over that planet, by that name. At that time let him write 4 names on a parchment of a deer, without interrupting the writing by any speech. Then let him put the amulet on his neck, as an amulet, and then the woman whose name and the name of her father he has pronounced will love him a great love by the virtue of that name. Similar things I've found in great numbers, and they are almost infinite, and these things have spread and reached the hands of great rabbis, but they hide them in scrupulous manner, and they think that their treasury is replete with pearls, and they are very reverent while studying the names when they need them. And that's a quote from Abraham Abulafia, describing a kind of magical use of the name. I'm not going to suggest obviously using it in that way, but just pointing out from a kind of a historical perspective. One simple way that one can work with the 72 names of God is to meditate on the meanings and combinations of the different Hebrew letters. This ideally does require some knowledge of Hebrew and the meanings of the 22 letters, but it can bring you some really good insights without having to do kind of, complicated rituals and prayers, etc. It should also be remembered that, and I quote, each glyph of the Hebrew alphabet was, and still is, considered to be the physical embodiment of a divine power, i.e. an angel, the visualization of which is understood to bring about definite influences on the individual participating in such an action. Furthermore, there is a tradition that the very name of an angel or an angelic host, i.e. its actual visual depiction in the fiery shapes of the Hebrew letters, comprises the body of the associated angel or angelic host. Visualizing a fully spelled out Hebrew angelic name in your mind was considered equivalent to being in direct contact with the actual manifestation of the associated celestial entity. So that's a quote from Jacobus Schwartz, but very relevant because what we're talking about here is the power of the Hebrew letters, and they are considered to be physical embodiments of that divine power. So you can bring that power through drawing them, through visualizing them, through working with the energies. And obviously they are also linked to the tarot cards of the major arcana as well. So that's another way that you can work with the particular letters and combinations of letters. One can also experiment with the names using different tonal or musical sounds of the specific Hebrew letters, as well as chanting and mantra style meditations. So similar to the ones that we discussed with regards to Abraham Abulafia at the beginning of this study. So for example, one can chant out all of the names of the angels in order. There's also some interesting musical approaches to this as well, such as those favoured by Paul Foster Case, where specific musical tones would be linked with the different Shem angels, and also other applications that are similar in a kind of prayer approach in works like the Sharai Tzayin by Nathan Netta Ben Moshe of Hanover. And I'll put the name of that text in the show notes. And a simple way of meditating with the names is to print out the relevant angelic name and then focus on chanting each of the 3 syllables whilst visualizing the name flashing with light and filling your entire being. And this can also be expanded out into a daily practice, as I mentioned, where you would chant each of the angelic names in one long chant. And I've had a lot of success with that personally, and found it a very rewarding part of my practice. Another example of a very mystical approach to the 72 names can also be found in the writings of Yehuda Berg, whose 72 Names of God, published in 2003, describes the Shem as being a technology for the soul, writing, "The 72 names provide us with a vehicle to connect with the spiritual current that flows throughout reality." Yehuda Berg book is quite interesting, and they see working with the Shem as being very much linked with spiritual development, and also talks about how each of the 72 names operates like a cable transmitting energy into the physical world, and that each letter signifies 3 forces, which are a positive, a negative, and a ground wire. And all that's needed is to activate these forces is a belief, a faith, a conviction on the part of the magician that they are real. An understanding also of their specific influence, and then also doing a physical action to activate their power. Berg writes, "This structure creates a circuit of energy that safely channels spiritual current into your life, just as a 3-prong plug securely transmits electrical current into your home appliances. When you meditate upon these various 3-letter sequences, a particular spiritual influence is transmitted directly to your soul." An example of a meditation from Berg on Vahuya, who is the first angel, is as follows. "Awaken remorse in your heart for prior misdeeds. Accept the frank spiritual truth that problems in your life are the result of your past actions. Concentrating on this name will now uproot the negative seeds you've already planted. In doing so, you transform your past, reshape the present, and assure yourself a future of joy and fulfillment." There are also many other ways you can work with them in a more magical sense, obviously ranging from meditating on the tarot card attributed to each one, using guided visualizations. You can also work with a specific planet and a zodiacal sign path workings, as well as in a prayer sense with you actually using the specific psalms that are associated to each one. You can also use the Shem angels to deepen one's understanding of the Tree of Life in the 4 worlds, as all of the correspondences that we discussed before, particularly with the Golden Dawn material, can really bring to life the idea of the 4 worlds of Absolute, the archetypal, Bria, the creative, Yetzirah, the formative, and Asaya, the action. So, for example, one can use the seal of a specific angel, use the relevant tarot card, and then specific zodiacal signs and correspondences to really build it out into a really powerful ritual that will bring all of the aspects of the angel through with it. There's also numerous books out there which describe other ways of working with them in a more ritual magic sense. So Nick Farrell's excellent Shem Grimoire is a really, really good book, worth looking at. Also the Golden Dawn techniques of creating talismans using the Shem angels, whereby each angel has a specific magical intention that it can help with, and the magician creates a talisman every 5 days. So it's a very extensive process that goes on a long time. Obviously, you don't necessarily need to do that. You could just focus on using one for a specific intention. But if you wanted to do the whole thing, then you could obviously work through all of the angels creating a talisman. There's also more simpler ways of working with it as well. And then there's also obviously the more traditional full approaches, which were favoured by the likes of Ambelain, and which I mentioned are very time consuming and strenuous, so maybe not something I'd recommend for beginners. As we mentioned previously in the essay, these begin with the invocation to Solomon from Eliphas Levi, before one would then obviously recite the relevant verses from the Psalms as well, as really kind of as a method of balancing out the aura, I think, before you then obviously go on to actually calling for the angel. Ultimately, however, through contact and regular working with the angels of the Shem HaMephorash, we are aligning ourselves with the universal clock as the sun enters each decanate or quinance. And so it's through this work that we can really kind of begin to unite the microcosm and the macrocosm as one. really creating an act of theurgy and connecting with our higher self. And it's also important to ensure, obviously, spiritual purity to a certain degree when you're working with the Shem angels. So things like banishings, middle pillar exercises, etc. will kind of clear out your aura a little bit, just make it a little bit easier to connect with these mighty beings. As Moses Cordovero wrote, some of the ancients commented that by the combination and permutation of the name of the 72 or other names, after a great concentration, the righteous man combines the forces and unites them and arouses desires in them, each to his brother as the membrane virile of man, and his companion until there is poured upon him a great influx, with the condition that he who deals with this will be a well-prepared vessel and worthy of receiving the spiritual force. For if it is not the case, it will become cruel to be turned into a degenerate wild vine. That's all we've got time for now. However, there will be a lot more episodes coming up in the future. If you have enjoyed this episode, please remember to rate and review the podcast and share it with a friend who you think might be interested, as we're really keen to continue to grow it. Also, if you would like to contribute, you can through our Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee, links in the show notes. Also, if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them, so please do feel free to drop me an email in the email address. To finish tonight's episode, I wanted to finish with a beautiful poem by Charles Williams, who was a member of the Golden Dawn and also a fantastic poet. And this is the hymn for Septuagesima Sunday. Out of the deep they arose, measure in measure they came, on the mighty wind that blows, creation in paths of flame. Sun with each farther sun trod the dance of the sky, and in the thin air was begun the journey of God Most High. Out of himself he came, in the vibrating light, the fire of himself the flame, shone in himself the night. Far in himself for rest, all things were born to be, who move in a royal quest of the end that is only he. Note upon rising note, through the times and the spaces heard, archangel, planet and mote sang but the single word, the word he uttered of old, in the haunts of eternity, all things to all things told, the word that is only he. Voiced of the Lord arise, through man in darkness and flame, till through his inner skies sounds the unnameable name. Fashion the heavenly way, till last of his creatures we, in his union of night and day, know ourselves naught but he.